Hello, everyone, and welcome to So You Think. Sorry for the delay. We're just so glad to have you all with us this evening. And we are just really excited about what's going on in the new show. And know that we are going to be broadcasting. We're going to be on Envision radio.com. Again, that's envision-radio.com, as well as the Simple app. We've been picked up by the Simple app, and so we're really excited about that as well. So, but tonight we're going to go ahead and get started. We're running a little bit behind, but that's okay. Tonight I'm just going to introduce right now our co-host. Our co-host for the evening is going to be Minister Cedric. Hey, welcome, Cedric. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Just getting ready to talk about sex.
Oh, let's talk about sex, baby.
Yeah,
okay.
Remember that song? Yeah, we're so glad to have Minister Cedric. He has his own show called Relentless Pursuit, which can be picked up on Elation Radio. And so we're so glad to have him as our co-host. And tonight we have with us as our guest tonight, we're going to be kind of talking to her about this topic. And her name is Pastor Kilma Cunningham. And so we'd like to ask you all to welcome Pastor Cunningham as we bring her on. Hey, welcome, Kilma. How you doing?
Hey guys, how y'all?
Hello, how you doing?
Yeah, we're so happy to have you with us. Pastor Cunningham is the pastor of Richards Chapel United Methodist Church in Troy, Ohio, and she also is the campus pastor for the Central State University in Ohio as well. And so we are just so happy to have her with us tonight to talk about this subject. And we're going to dive right on in because we got this is a half-hour show, so we don't have too much time. But we want to go ahead and jump right on in, Kilma. And we want to talk about sex in the church.
Why not?
Right. Why not? And so I guess the question is that why is there such a high level of shame associated with having this conversation about sex in the church?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that we have to understand, and particularly as it pertains to those of us who are African American.
Okay.
I think that there are some major issues that are unsolved with our history, particularly our history in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of that, and in light of all the conversations that we're having about, Black Lives Matter, or whether, racial discrimination, injustice, all of those kinds of things, it all really kind of goes back to what happened to us as enslaved persons in this country.
Okay.
In addition to the fact that Black bodies were used as indispensable property, that slave masters did whatever they wanted to do with slave women and some men as well. I think that has fostered a notion of shame around sexuality. The other thing is we were filtered. All of this was filtered through a very puritanistic idea of purity and all of that. And so many of our natural inclinations that would allow us to say, this is my body and God made it, which is really, really clear. It is so interesting to me that we have all these issues. And it is very clear that God is saying, I made this, I made that, I called out this. But when I decided to make something in my image, and I formed you. And it said that he shaped us. Come on.
All right.
He shaped us. He didn't just form us, but he shaped us.
Yes.
And he did that. God did that because there was this notion of sexuality that he would attach to us.
Yeah.
That was absolutely pure. That was absolutely cool. God was cool with that. And we were cool with that until we started distorting stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Cool with that until we started distorting stuff.
All about the sex. Right.
Absolutely. I didn't know what to add.
No, listen. Everybody's having sex. Birds do it. Bees do it. All of us do it. So the real issue is, what is our issue?
Yeah. What is our issue?
What is our issue?
Go ahead, Cedric.
Now I'm gonna come from a holier than thou point of view, not
Oh,
necessarily my own, but just what I've heard over the years. Because we shouldn't be doing it because one, it's taboo to talk about it. Two, if we're not married, then why should we? We're not supposed to be engaging. Three, you know what? If it's for anything other than reproduction, then we doing a. It's a very perverse thing. You know, that's how I growing up was kind of taught about it in the church. You know,
sure.
and so I went along all those years, and I was quiet about it because, well, we always pretend in the church that we okay, we doing all right, and we doing the right things. So I hope I didn't steer off the topic with that, but those are some of the reasons that I heard growing up why we didn't discuss this topic in church, and or shall I say why church folk didn't talk about it, because it was what happens behind those closed doors is a sacred thing.
Your mama told you that there were some things that you should do, like wash yourself, right?
Right.
Yeah, my mom
That
told me
you
a
got
lot more than that.
that you wash all the other parts.
Yes,
So
yes,
if it wasn't supposed to be something that was talked about, we talked about all of that. But we've distorted some of that as well. I
yes.
remember an aunt telling me, she was having that discussion with me about making sure that nobody approached my kitty cat.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and what's that?
Yeah.
So it had a name.
Yeah.
So if somebody had touched me, all I would be able to say is that they touched my kitty cat.
Yeah. Right.
So what's wrong with that? We don't teach our children. We have to continue to teach our children the appropriate names for body parts.
Right.
And we have to educate children about sex because everybody else is educating them about sex. So
That's right.
they hear about it from our perspective, and that sex can actually be a holy thing.
Yes,
And
it can.
the whole notion of procreation ain't biblical. It don't say just have sex to have kids.
That's right.
It's birds do it and bees do it.
Right.
You get it right.
Yeah, but I guess you just said something, Kilmer, that really just kind of strikes me, is that we have forfeited our responsibility in the church for allowing people to teach our kids about sex ed in school and talk about these different things, and deal with these different issues in school. But we forfeited our responsibility in the church.
Yeah, because we didn't resolve our own issues. One of the questions, I won't use one of your questions. I just noticed my phone is turned incorrectly. I'm going to fix that in a minute. But ask the question about how can the church be a haven to have those conversations. The reality is that means the pastor got to be on point.
Yeah.
On point. The pastor can't have hangups. The pastor can't have issues. The pastor can't be hoeing around. The pastor has to be in a place where he or she is comfortable enough that they can facilitate that discussion. It's got to happen.
Yeah. It's got to happen, or else we're going to have other people educating our kids, and it may not be the way. Okay, there you go. And it may not be the way in which we would have for them to be educated on the topic. And so then we're suffering with the fallout from that as the church, because, well, they said I could have it as long as I have, a condom on, or as long as I, do these things and whatnot.
Well, let me say this. I think one of the real important things is that we understand what sexual activity fosters in each one of us.
Okay.
So I'm a girl. So let me go here. I think one of the things that we've always been taught, and y'all can tell me if I'm wrong, that at some point, particularly early on, that guys don't look at sex the same way girls do.
Right.
That it is much more of a natural urge for boys. Not that girls don't have the urge. Please don't get that wrong. But I think, there is an attachment of emotion to that that is often not displayed with some of the young men. And so when I have sex with you, what happens is that there is an emotional attachment that occurs with most women. And that emotional attachment, when it's not there with the guys, it sets you up. It's setting you up for for not necessarily failure, but it's setting you up to be hurt. It's setting you up. I remember years ago, somebody talked about the notion that when the seed is left in you,
right,
and you can't figure out how come you can't get it together with the next guy.
Right.
Part of the reason is because there's somebody else that's still living on the inside
of you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that to some degree that's true, because we attach that emotion. We attach that emotion, and that filter or that emotion can be so critical in a healthy outlook on your life.
Right.
So yeah. It has repercussions far beyond am I supposed to do it or not when you're not in committed relationship.
Right.
And if you two decide that we're gonna be friends with benefits, that's your business.
Right.
But I'm telling you, we got emotion attached to that thing.
Yeah.
It is funny you say that, Kim, because I totally agree with it. Because when I think of sex, sex can be spiritual. We know that it's physical, but it can also have an emotional attachment to it. And a lot of times what we do, I like to say there's an exchange of essence there when you come together as one, because that's how we were sort of meant to come together. And I think what happens, and the reason we really can't talk about it, is because we get caught up because it feels so good. You hear me? I think that I think that we allow that feel good to rule us. And you mentioned the part about young men and young women. Honestly, truthfully, I don't think there's a difference in how we feel about it. I think boys just act upon it more than girls. I would be honest. I think when you're a teenager, you're a horny little teenager, whether you male or female, right? and so I think that's what keeps us from talking about it. We're ashamed of it because y'all know how it is. When you get to church, you got to be prim and proper. You know what I mean?
But that's part of the problem.
Yes, that is part of the problem. I agree with you,
because I think the reality of what church should be. I remember just preparing for this conversation. I remember this was probably, I'm sure it was over 20 years ago. It was when the AIDS epidemic was surfacing, and probably 5 or 6, 7 years into that, there was an African American group out of somewhere that came up with a curriculum to have those conversations with our young people. And so I was at my home church, and I went to the pastor and talked about it. He was agreeable. He was amenable. But when I started talking to folks, telling them, well, we're going to talk about AIDS and HIV and so forth and so on, the parents, you would have thought that I was trafficking their children or something. It was they went ballistic. And because they didn't understand, and I had to really take a lot of time to explain to them how important it was for their children to be educated about this disease. And so it's the same thing with sex. Anything pertaining to sex, anything that we think has any relationship to sex, even if it don't.
Right.
Because HIV and AIDS didn't always have a sexual connotation, except the sexual connotation that we gave it.
Right. Yeah.
That's it. That's another conversation.
That's another conversation. And that's coming up in a few weeks.
Yeah. So. But it became really difficult. But when the kids got in there, it was so funny because they asked questions. The conversation was going.
Yes.
And then one of their parents came in the room for something, and everything shut down. I said, "You got to leave."
I
said, "If you trust me with your kids, just leave, because they're not going to talk in front of you."
Right.
Which is a crazy part of this whole notion about sex. What is it about my children, or me rather, that my kids won't talk to me about sex?
Right.
I'm looking at you. You here because I had sex with your daddy. So what's the real issue here? Why can't we have those conversations with our kids?
Well, I mean, I know for me, we had those conversations with our daughter. We had those conversations where we talked about appropriate body parts with our daughter. We didn't talk about, we called it what it was.
No kitty cats, no pocketbooks.
No.
None of that.
Honestly, and I think that as a result of that, those were some things where she made up in her mind. There were some things that she wasn't going to do until later on in life. But again, that was her choice.
Sure.
That was her choice. But again, I think because of the ability to be able to have those conversations that afforded us, that really allowed us to have that relationship where we could talk about anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
When she started talking to me about her monthly cycle, I was like, oh, okay. I'm your dad.
And then you go in the bathroom later and go, Lord Jesus.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But you're right.
I guess I want to kind of begin to kind of take this in a different direction. Kim, I know you said something earlier about the pastors and whatnot, but what steps can a church take to create an atmosphere where this is an acceptable conversation?
Well, I mean, there are tons of sexual texts in the Bible. There are tons of texts that talk about sexual activity in one way or another, good and bad. If you want to do Hosea and talk about Gomer, or and maybe not from the position that you think. Mm-hmm. Come on now, because we have a real puritanical view of the text too. Mm-hmm. And so there are some opportunities, I think, for us to talk about sex in a casual way that's not so heavy, that's not so deep, that don't make people sweat. Because like I said, you look out at the audience and just about everybody out there is doing it.
They're doing it.
And the reality of that is, so let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it.
You want your congregation, as a pastor, if you want your congregation to be healthy, you're going to have to talk about that, because that is one of the things where we are in, as a woman, if I'm single and I'm just looking for love in all the wrong places, and I'm just, I'm with this guy, and it's not because I just want to sleep with everybody. It's because I want to, in the immortal words of Chef, I just want to be held.
Okay.
You're right there.
Because my daddy wasn't around, my daddy didn't love me, or whatever, or he was, and I just want to be held. And so I look for that where I can find it.
Right.
And it ends up becoming something that is incredibly damaging to my self-esteem, to my character.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's what you want to do, if that is your intent, that's different. But when I know that you're really looking to have the kind of intimacy, and that's another thing. Intimacy and sex are not the same thing.
Same thing, right?
And so we can have sex all day, but intimacy is something that can be very different. Intimacy, sex can be an intimate thing, but intimacy is critical whether it's sexual or not. Intimacy has to do with just the knowing.
Yeah.
It is, y'all are my friends. And so one of the things that I know about you, I have been intimate with you enough in terms of sharing things, talking about things, telling the truth about things, how I feel about things, what I'm afraid of, what's really what keeps me up at night. That's intimacy. And knowing that you ain't gonna go around and talk about me to nobody else, knowing that we have that confidence, that's intimacy. And so when we can begin to develop that, the sex is gonna be on point.
Yeah, right.
Yes, Lord.
I like that.
About it.
To develop the intimacy, and then the sex will be on point. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because that's more here.
Yes, it is.
Than anything.
And so much of it is here. We talk about genitalia, and we all want the genitalia to work. That's true. But the issue is it is a head game.
Right.
Yeah. It's very much a head game.
Yeah.
It
really is. Wow. We have covered a bunch. And so we're going to have to revisit this topic, Kilma. We would love to have you come back on the show. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. Minister Cedric, is that okay with you to have her back?
That's perfectly fine with me. I'd love to have you on. Yes, that is
great.
Appreciate y'all.
Well, here basically the reason why we've been running this down below, where it says if you want to talk to someone, you can call New Beginnings Family Services here in Louisville. We actually provide counseling and therapy services for people who you may not feel comfortable talking to your child about sex, but this is a Christian counseling group. We actually have our therapists, they're pastors' wives, they're the therapists, licensed therapists, whatnot, and they would really love, to be able to minister to that. And if you don't feel comfortable, they could talk to you about helping you get to that point to where you can have those conversations with your kids and whatnot, with your family members and whatnot. So we really want to make sure that that's available to you, those that are listening. Again, we are going to be, this is something that's going to be done live every Monday. We have various topics that we're going to be covering that's going to be coming up. Next week, we're going to be talking about abuse and domestic violence. Then we're going to be talking about shifting into that homosexuality conversation. So you thought that we weren't going to talk about homosexuality. Well, we're going to talk about that too. We're going to be talking about all these different subjects. We're going to be talking about even, so you think we're not going to talk about a fake church growth. We're going to be talking about, that's going to be a hot topic. And then, here's the one that I'm really looking forward to too. So you think we weren't going to talk about grown folk playing childish games, church mess, and church hurt.
That's gonna end up being a series.
We're gonna be doing a lot of these different things. We're really looking forward to really branching out and really touching hopefully people's lives to the point that we can encourage people to look at life issues in a non-traditional way.
Right.
That's what the whole purpose of So You Think is about. It's a show that is spiritually relevant, culturally significant, and it encourages people to look at life issues in a non-traditional way. So please join us on Mondays at 7 p.m. Mondays at 7 p.m. for the live recording of this, but also you'll be able to hear it as a podcast on Thursdays at 6 o'clock, beginning this coming Thursday on envision-radio.com, or get the simple app and look up So You Think with Pastor Terry. And if you'd like to have more information about the show, please hit me up on my Facebook page, or you can go to the YouTube channel and check it out. But we'd love to hear from you. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us, Pastor Kimma. Thank you for joining us and helping me out, Minister Cedric. And like I said, we'll be revisiting this topic again later on. And so we hope to see you guys again. And thank you all for being with us, and have a blessed day.
All right. God bless you. Thank you.
All right.
Have a good